The CEO's son called me useless as he kicked me out. He had no clue I held his company's fate in my hands. The day I walked into Lintech Industries, nobody noticed. That was exactly how I wanted it. "You must be the new operations intern," said Janine, the receptionist, barely looking up from her screen. "Grab a visitor badge and take the elevator to 7. HR will meet you." I nodded, clipping the temporary badge to my deliberately plain blazer. Nothing about me suggested I was anything but what they expected. Just another desperate MBA grad hoping to land a permanent role at Silicon Valley's fastest-growing tech company. My name is Alyssa Carter, 29, with 2 master's degrees and more money than everyone on the executive floor combined. Not that anyone would know it. My cheap laptop bag held a notebook, a company-issued laptop, and a letter I'd read so many times the creases were starting to tear. "Dearest Alyssa, if you're reading this, then I've lost my battle with time. Before you make any decisions about what I've left you, I need you to do one thing. Spend 3 months inside Lintech. Learn it from the ground up as I once did. What you do afterward is entirely your choice, but promise me you'll see with your own eyes first. All my love, Richard." Richard Langston wasn't just my godfather. He was the genius founder of Lintech, the visionary who transformed a garage startup into a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. What the company didn't know was that Richard had left me controlling interest, 51% of Lintech Industries, in a carefully constructed trust that would activate when I was ready. But first, I needed to understand what I would be inheriting. "Alyssa? I'm Alyssa from HR." A woman with kind eyes and a genuine smile approached. "Let's get you settled." For the next hour, I signed paperwork, received my orientation, and was walked to a cramped desk in the operations department, a glorified cubicle with a view of nothing but other cubicles. "Perfect. Don't expect much for the first few weeks," Melissa whispered. "Just keep your head down and try not to get noticed by the higher-ups until you know the landscape." "Why is that?" I asked, playing naive. Melissa's eyes darted around. "Let's just say the company culture has changed since the founder passed away." I already knew about the changes. After Richard's death 6 months ago, his longtime friend and second-in-command Charles Weldon had taken over as CEO, a logical, respectable choice. The problem wasn't Charles. It was his son. I met Connor Weldon my 3rd day. Or rather, I witnessed him. He burst through the department doors with 2 yes-men trailing behind him, laughing too loudly at something that clearly wasn't funny enough. "That quarterly report better be waiting for me by 4, he barked at a trembling project manager who looked about 10 years his senior. "Dad wants it at the investors' dinner tonight. But the data from engineering isn't." Did I ask for excuses? Connor's voice cut like glass. "For a clock. Or update your LinkedIn." He turned sharply, his Italian shoes squeaking against the polished floor, and disappeared into the elevator. "That's Connor Weldon," whispered Raj, my cubicle neighbor, Senior VP of Strategy and son of CEO Charles Weldon. "He seems like a nightmare?" "Yeah." Raj turned back to his monitor. "He's been worse since they announced he's being groomed for COO. Everyone's either kissing his ass or updating their resume." Over the next few weeks, I became what I needed to be: forgettable. I arrived early, stayed late, and kept my observations in an encrypted file. I saw how decisions were made based on ego rather than data. How brilliant ideas were shelved if they came from the wrong people. How Connor took credit for others' work while blaming his failures on subordinates. I watched a developer named Jared present an innovative security protocol that could revolutionize Lintech's flagship product, only to have Connor dismiss it as too experimental before greenlighting a flashier but fundamentally flawed alternative from one of his fraternity brothers who'd been hired as a consultant. "It's always been like this?" I asked Melissa over coffee one morning 3 weeks in. She sighed. "No." Under Richard, things were different. Merit mattered. Ideas were valued regardless of who suggested them. Her eyes grew distant. Richard could walk into a room and make the janitor feel as important as the board members. The contrast was stark. Under Richard, Lintech had been innovative and employee-focused. Under the Weldons, it was becoming a playground for nepotism and short-term profits. The company's soul, what Richard had built, was being hollowed out piece by piece. I was so careful. For 7 weeks, I maintained my cover perfectly. I did my assigned work efficiently, but not brilliantly. I spoke when spoken to in meetings, but never volunteered insights. I became part of the furniture, watching, learning, and silently taking stock of who could be trusted and who couldn't. Then came the budget meeting. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My supervisor had the flu, and I was sent with his notes as a last-minute replacement. I sat at the back, meant only to observe and report back. Connor was presenting projected numbers for their new initiative, the one they'd chosen over Jared's. As he clicked through slides of inflated projections and glossed over risks, I felt Richard's passion for integrity burning inside me. When Connor stated that implementation costs would be negligible, something in me snapped. "Excuse me," I said, my voice quiet but clear. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the nobody in the back row. "There seems to be a calculation error on slide 16. The implementation costs don't account for the back-end integration requirements detailed in the engineering report." The silence deepened. Connor's face flushed crimson as he squinted to recognize me. "And you are?" he asked, voice dripping with disdain. "Alyssa Carter, operations intern." I kept my tone neutral, professional. His face transformed from confusion to contempt. "An intern? You're interrupting my presentation to point out a non-existent error." "I just thought." "That's the problem," he said, smile tight and eyes cold. "You're not here to think. You're here to learn how real business is done." He turned to the room. Now, as I was saying before, our intern decided to share her community college wisdom. I let the insult wash over me, but I'd made a critical error. I'd drawn attention. And in Connor Weldon's world, attention from those beneath him was only acceptable in the form of praise. As everyone filed out after the meeting, Connor blocked my path. "Operations, was it?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's have a chat about your role here at Lintech." I'd broken my cover, and I just made an enemy of the one person who thought he owned the company. What he didn't know was that the company was already mine. I expected consequences for speaking up in the budget meeting. What I didn't expect was how creative Connor would be with his retribution. "Effective immediately, you'll be assisting with our records digitization project," he informed me the next morning, his smile all teeth. "We need someone with your attention to detail." The records digitization project turned out to be scanning decades of paper documents in a windowless room in the basement. The previous person assigned had quit 3 days in. "This is punishment," Melissa whispered when she found me surrounded by dusty boxes. "Nobody crosses Connor in meetings. Especially not an intern." "I know." I smiled, scanning another faded invoice. "It's fine." It wasn't fine, but it was informative. Those forgotten documents contained Lintech's complete history, original contracts, early product plans, handwritten notes from Richard himself. Things nobody had bothered to look at in years. Things that told a different story than the polished company narrative. I methodically scanned each document, but also made my own private copies of the ones that revealed Richard's true vision and how far the company had strayed from it. After a week in document purgatory, Connor apparently decided my punishment wasn't visible enough. He wanted an audience. "Carter." His voice boomed across the cafeteria during lunch hour. "I need those engagement metrics from the Hanover account pronto." I looked up from my salad, confused. "I don't work on the Hanover account. You do now." He dropped a thick folder on my table, splattering dressing across my shirt. "And I need it reformatted by 3. It was impossible work, analyzing data for an account I had no background on in 4 hours, while also completing my regular tasks. But I simply nodded. "I'll do my best." "Your best." He snorted, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Let's hope it's better than your budget analysis." The incident became a pattern. Connor would assign me impossible tasks with impossible deadlines, often in front of an audience, clearly hoping I'd fail spectacularly or quit in frustration. I did neither. "How are you handling this?" Raj asked one evening, finding me still at my desk at 8 p.m. Most people would have walked out by now. I shrugged. "I've dealt with worse." I hadn't, but the lie came easily. The truth, that every humiliation was another piece of evidence I was gathering, wouldn't have made sense to him. Well, you've got an admirer. Raj nodded toward Jared from engineering, who was approaching with 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use this, Jared said, setting 1 cup on my desk. Legend has it you embarrassed Connor by actually understanding math. I smiled despite myself. Not my smartest career move, but definitely your most heroic. Jared leaned against my desk. My team's talking about starting an Alyssa Carter fan club.
Please don't, I laughed.
I'm already on his hit list. Jared's smile faded. Seriously though, what he's doing isn't right. Have you considered filing an HR complaint? With his father as CEO? I don't think so. Not everyone's afraid of the Weldons, he said quietly. Some of us remember how things were under Richard Langston. My chest tightened at the mention of Richard's name. You knew him. He hired me personally. 5 years ago. Jared's eyes grew distant. He could see potential in people before they saw it in themselves. After that night, Jared became an ally. So did Melissa. And gradually, a small circle of others who were tired of Connor's reign of terror. People who remembered Lintech's original values and mourned their erosion. Meanwhile, Connor's behavior worsened. His flashy new project, the replacement for Jared's rejected security protocol, was falling behind schedule and over budget. Rather than acknowledge the flaws, he doubled down, pressuring the board for more resources while blaming the engineering team for lack of vision. 3 weeks after our confrontation in the budget meeting, I walked into the office to find my desk had been moved to a storage closet next to the bathrooms. A space issue, explained my supervisor apologetically. Executive decision. I nodded and set up my laptop in the glorified broom closet, the message clear. I was being erased. That afternoon, Connor accidentally spilled coffee on my presentation notes 5 minutes before a department meeting, then criticized my lack of preparation when I presented without them. This is getting out of hand, Melissa said as she helped me clean up afterward. He's targeting you specifically. It doesn't matter, I said, meaning it more than she could know. My 3 months were almost up, but Connor wasn't finished. The next morning, he stood in my closet doorway, a smirk playing on his lips. Comfortable, Carter? I thought you'd appreciate the privacy. Perfect for all that independent thinking you like to do. I looked up from my screen. Was there something you needed, Mr. Weldon? Just checking on our rising star. His voice dripped sarcasm. By the way, I've been meaning to ask why Lintech? You could be getting coffee from middle managers at any mediocre company in the valley. Why here? The question caught me off guard. For a split second, Richard's face flashed in my mind, his kind eyes, his proud smile when I graduated, the way he always believed I could do anything. I swallowed hard. I admired the founder's vision, I said simply. Something dark flashed in Connor's eyes. Richard Langston is finished. His vision died with him. Lintech belongs to the future now. My future. That evening, I received an email. The entire company was required to attend an emergency staff meeting the following morning. Something about an unexpected audit result. As I shut down my computer, a text appeared on my phone from an unknown number. He knows something. Be careful tomorrow.
Jay.
I stared at the message, a chill running through me. Had I been found out? Was my cover blown? Or was Connor simply escalating his campaign against the intern who dared to question him? Either way, I knew tomorrow would change everything. I just didn't realize how completely my life and the future of Lintech would be transformed in the next 24 hours. I arrived early for the emergency meeting, heart pounding as I scanned the gathering crowd for whoever had sent the warning text. Jared caught my eye from across the room and gave a barely perceptible shake of his head.
Not now.
The conference room filled quickly, an anxious buzz of whispers filling the air. Whatever was happening had everyone on edge. I spotted Melissa slipping in through the side door, her usual smile replaced with a tight-lipped grimace. Do you know what this is about? I whispered when she sat down beside me. The quarterly audit report leaked last night, she murmured. It's bad. Someone flagged serious discrepancies in Connor's project data. My stomach dropped. I'd seen those numbers in the budget meeting, the ones I'd questioned, but I hadn't leaked anything. The room fell silent as Charles Weldon entered, his normally composed face lined with tension. Connor followed, eyes scanning the room like a predator searching for prey. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Charles began, his voice steady but grave. "As some of you may have heard, there have been concerns raised about our financial reporting for the Safeguard Initiative." The Safeguard Initiative, Connor's pet project, the one chosen over Jared's proposal. "The audit has been delayed pending further investigation," Charles continued. "This is an unfortunate development, particularly with our investor presentation next week." I kept my face carefully neutral, but my mind raced. A delayed audit meant someone had found something significant enough to warrant extended scrutiny, something that could potentially derail Connor's path to glory. "We will need everyone's cooperation to resolve this quickly," Charles finished. "Now, Connor has a few words about the project timeline adjustments." Connor stepped forward, all artificial charm and confidence. "Thanks, Dad. First, I want to assure everyone that Safeguard remains on track for a successful launch." His practiced smile didn't reach his eyes, which continued to scan the room. "However," he continued, "it seems we have a problem with loyalty at Lintech. Someone has been sharing confidential information and misrepresenting our progress to the auditors." The tension in the room thickened. This wasn't just about an audit, it was a witch hunt. In times like these, we discover who's truly committed to our vision, Connor said, pacing slowly, and who's working to undermine it. His eyes stopped on me, and my blood froze. "Isn't that right, Miss Carter?" Every head in the room turned toward me. I kept my expression composed, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Connor's smile widened, shark-like. "No? Let me refresh your memory. 2 days ago, you accessed confidential files regarding the Safeguard financials. Files you had no authorization to view. I hadn't, but denying it would only make me look guilty. I was compiling data for the report you assigned me," I replied. "The report that conveniently contained the exact information that was leaked to the auditors?" Connor was walking toward me now, voice rising. "The same report you've been quietly sharing with engineering staff after hours?" He met my conversations with Jared. Someone had been watching us. "I didn't leak anything to the auditors," I said firmly. "Your badge accessed the server at 9:42 p.m. Connor suddenly shouted, his composed facade cracking. "Do you think we're idiots? Do you think you can sabotage months of work and just get away with it?" The room was silent. Charles looked uncomfortable but made no move to intervene. "If you check the logs," I began, "you'll see I wasn't even in the building at that." "Enough." Connor's face was contorted with rage now. "We've wasted enough time on this nobody." He reached down, grabbed my employee badge from where it hung on my blazer, and yanked it so hard the clip broke. Several people gasped. "You're fired, effective immediately," he hissed. He turned to the room. "This is what happens when we lower our hiring standards. When we let just anyone walk through our doors." I sat frozen as Connor dropped my badge into a nearby trash can with theatrical disgust. "Security will escort you to collect your personal items," he announced, reaching for my coffee mug on the table and tossing it in after the badge. "The rest of your workspace belongings will be mailed to you." The cruel emphasis on workspace drew a few uncomfortable laughs. Everyone knew about my closet office. As security approached, I stood slowly, gathering my dignity around me like armor. This public humiliation was unexpected, but not insurmountable. I had prepared for many contingencies. This was just another path to the same destination. "I'm sorry it came to this, Alyssa," Charles said quietly as I passed, a token gesture of regret that cost him nothing. I nodded but said nothing. Words weren't necessary anymore. As I was led through the open office, past rows of averted eyes and uncomfortable expressions, I caught sight of Jared half standing at his desk, face twisted with helpless anger. Melissa emerged from the conference room behind me, hurrying to catch up. "This is wrong," she whispered furiously as she walked beside me to the elevator. "Everyone knows you wouldn't do this." "It's okay," I said softly. It's not okay. He can't just. Melissa. I stopped at the elevator, meeting her worried eyes with calm certainty. Trust me, everything's going to make sense very soon. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, turning to face the floor I'd worked on for nearly 3 months. I caught a final glimpse of Connor watching from the conference room doorway, triumph etched across his face. As the doors closed, I allowed myself a small smile. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a calendar reminder I'd set weeks ago. 3-month mark. Contact Richard's attorney. Connor thought he'd just destroyed my career. He had no idea he'd actually just accelerated his own downfall. That evening, I sat in the tasteful office of Eleanor Prescott, Richard's longtime attorney and the executor of his estate. The mahogany conference table between us was covered with documents, trust paperwork, ownership certificates, board member dossiers. You're certain about this timing? Eleanor asked, pushing her glasses up her nose. Richard's instructions allowed flexibility. We could wait. I thought of Connor's smug face, of Jared's shelved innovations, of Melissa's quiet fear, of all the employees watching their company's soul being hollowed out day by day. No more waiting, I said, picking up the sterling silver pen she'd placed before me. Richard wanted me to see the company with clear eyes. Now I have. I signed my name on the trust activation documents with a steady hand. Schedule the board meeting for Monday, I said, capping the pen. I believe it's time Connor Weldon learned what useless really means. The Lintech boardroom had always been designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Silicon Valley, leather chairs surrounded a gleaming table that could seat 20, and the wall-mounted screens displayed real-time company metrics in glowing blue charts. It was a room built for power plays and billion-dollar decisions. Today, it would witness the biggest power shift in company history. I arrived 40 minutes early, dressed not in the forgettable blazers and sensible shoes of Alyssa the intern, but in a tailored charcoal suit that had cost more than a month of the salary I'd been earning. Eleanor walked beside me, briefcase in hand, our heels clicking in perfect rhythm across the marble lobby. You could have used the private elevator, the receptionist stammered, clearly confused by my return and new appearance. Carter, is it? The main entrance is fine. Thank you, I replied pleasantly. The same security guard who had escorted me out 2 weeks ago now held the door open, eyes widening in recognition. The executive floor was quiet when we arrived, the boardroom empty except for Diane, the board secretary, who was arranging folders at each seat. May I help you? She asked, looking between Eleanor and me with uncertainty. We're here for the board meeting, Eleanor replied. Ms. Carter will need the seat at the head of the table. Diane blinked. I'm sorry. That's reserved for Mr. Weldon. The visitor seats are along the wall. Not today, Eleanor said, placing her briefcase on the table and extracting a thick folder. You'll find everything in order. As Diane reviewed the documents, her professional composure cracked. I need to make some calls, she said, voice thin with shock. Of course, I smiled. But the meeting will proceed as scheduled. For the next 30 minutes, I watched the boardroom fill with confusion. Board members arrived in 2s and 3s, eyeing me with puzzled expressions as they took their usual seats. Some recognized me vaguely, but couldn't place from where. Others whispered behind their hands, casting curious glances. At exactly 10 a.m., Connor strode in, laughing at something on his phone. He wore a new suit, custom, by the look of it, and the confident smile of a man about to reach the pinnacle of his ambitions. Today was supposed to be his coronation, the day the board would formally announce his path to co-CEO alongside his father. He froze mid-step when he saw me, confusion clouding his features before recognition dawned. What the hell is she doing here? He demanded, voice cutting through the boardroom murmurs. Security. That won't be necessary, Mr. Weldon, Eleanor said, rising. Ms. Carter has every right to be here. More than most, in fact. Charles Weldon entered behind his son, his face shifting from confusion to concern as he assessed the room. What's going on? Diane, why is... Dad, it's the intern I fired, Connor interrupted. The one who leaked the audit. Former intern, I corrected, standing. but current majority shareholder and chairwoman of Lintech Industries. The silence that fell was absolute. Connor's face went slack with shock, then flushed crimson. "That's impossible," he sputtered. "Dad, what is this nonsense?" Eleanor stepped forward. "If I may, I'd like to distribute these documents to the board. They'll explain everything." As folders were passed around, I maintained eye contact with Connor, whose face cycled through disbelief, anger, and the first edges of fear. "This is ridiculous," he insisted, though his voice had lost its certainty.
Dad.
Charles had opened his folder. The color drained from his face as he read. "It's legitimate," he said quietly. "Richard's Trust. His shares, 51% ownership." He looked up at me, truly seeing me for the first time. "You're Richard's goddaughter." "I am," I confirmed. "This has to be a joke," Connor said, but no one was laughing. Some nobody in turn can't just walk in and... "Alyssa Carter is a nobody," Eleanor interjected. "She holds dual master's degrees in business and computer science from Stanford. She's the daughter of Richard's oldest friend, his goddaughter, and his chosen successor as specified in his estate planning." The board members were scanning their documents now, murmurs of surprise rippling through the room. "Ms. Carter has spent the past 3 months within the company at Richard's specific request," Eleanor continued, "observing operations from ground level before assuming her role." "Undercover boss," someone whispered, and a few nervous laughs escaped. Connor slammed his fist on the table. "This is a hostile takeover. We'll fight this in court." "There's nothing to fight," Eleanor replied calmly. "The trust is ironclad. The shares have been legally Richard's and now Ms. Carter's since the company's founding. You may verify with your own legal team." I stepped forward. I didn't come here to create chaos or settle personal scores, though some might understand if I did. My eyes met Connor's briefly. "I came because Richard Langston built something extraordinary, and he entrusted me with its future." I turned to address the whole board. In recent months, Lintech has strayed from its founding principles. Innovation has been sacrificed for quick profits. Merit has been replaced by favoritism, and a culture of fear has supplanted the collaborative environment that made this company great. The board members shifted uncomfortably. They knew it was true. "I have immediate concerns about financial misreporting, particularly regarding the Safeguard Initiative," I continued, pulling out a folder of my own. "These documents show intentional inflation of projected returns and concealment of technical flaws." "Those are confidential," Connor shouted. "Not to the majority shareholder," I replied, "nor to the board members who have fiduciary responsibility." Charles stared at his son. "Connor, is this true?" Before Connor could respond, the boardroom door opened. Jared stood there, looking uncertain but determined, a flash drive in his hand. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, "but I was told by Ms. Prescott to bring this directly to the board meeting." "Perfect timing," I nodded, gesturing him in. "Jared is about to show you what might have been and what still could be." As Jared connected his drive to the display system, I watched Connor's face. The realization was dawning on him. The game was over. "This company's real strength has always been its people," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not its management titles or family connections." Jared's presentation appeared on screen, his rejected security protocol, with updated benchmarks showing it outperformed the Safeguard Initiative on every metric. As my first act as chairwoman, I announced, "I'm calling for a full review of all executive decisions made in the last 6 months, an immediate halt to the Safeguard Initiative pending investigation, and a complete reevaluation of our corporate leadership structure." I looked directly at Connor, who had collapsed into a chair, his face ashen. "Sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from those you believe are useless," I said quietly. The board meeting lasted 4 more hours. By the end, Connor had been suspended pending investigation, Charles had offered a conditional resignation, and I had been unanimously confirmed as executive chairwoman with interim operational authority. As the boardroom emptied, Connor paused at the door, his privileged world crumbling around him. "You planned this," he said, voice hollow. "All of it." I met his gaze steadily. "No, Connor. You built this outcome yourself, decision by decision. I just witnessed it. After he left, I stood alone at the window, looking out at the sprawling campus Richard had built from nothing. On the desk behind me sat his photograph, the same one I'd kept hidden in my apartment during my months as an intern. I saw everything. I whispered to his smiling image. Now it's time to rebuild. News travels fast in Silicon Valley. By morning, the story had leaked through whispers, texts, and anonymous posts on industry forums. The narrative shifted with each telling: corporate espionage, a secret heiress, Richard Langston's final chess move from beyond the grave. CNBC ran a segment speculating about Lintech's future. Tech blogs dissected my LinkedIn profile. I ignored it all and got to work. My first official act was emailing every employee. Not some sanitized corporate message crafted by PR, but a direct, honest assessment of where we stood and where we were going. I acknowledged the chaos and promised transparency moving forward. Lintech was built on innovation and integrity, I wrote. We're returning to those principles starting today. Then I called Melissa. I need your help, I told her when she arrived at my new office, Richard's old space, largely untouched since his death. I'm putting together a team to evaluate every termination, demotion, and reassignment from the last 6 months. Her eyes widened as understanding dawned. You're bringing people back. The ones who deserve it, I confirmed, starting with the product team that Connor dismantled. She smiled slowly. I know exactly who to call. By week's end, we'd reinstated 16 employees, talented people who'd been pushed out for questioning decisions, refusing to cut corners, or simply being on Connor's bad side. Each reinstatement sent a message through the company. Merit mattered again. On Wednesday, I called Jared to my office. You're promoting me, he guessed, looking around at Richard's engineering awards lining the walls. Better, I replied. I'm greenlighting your security protocol and putting you in charge of the development team. Full budget, best engineers, whatever you need. He stared at me. You're serious? Richard saw something in you, I said. He was rarely wrong about people. And Safeguard? Jared asked, being dismantled as we speak. I gestured to the papers on my desk, the audit report that was now complete. The projected numbers were fabricated. The prototype doesn't work. The whole thing was smoke and mirrors. Jared nodded, unsurprised. And Connor? My expression hardened slightly. That's a separate conversation. That conversation happened Thursday morning in one of the small conference rooms far from the executive floor. I'd chosen the location deliberately, neutral ground, glass walls, witnesses nearby. No power plays, no intimidation. Connor arrived with 2 attorneys. I'd expected that. What I hadn't expected was how quickly he'd aged in a week. The dark circles under his eyes, the rumpled suit, the defeated slump of his shoulders. Ms. Carter, his lead attorney, began, a steel-haired woman whose Louboutins probably cost more than my first car. My client is prepared to negotiate a separation agreement that would. I didn't ask for negotiations. I interrupted politely. This is a courtesy meeting to inform Mr. Weldon of the board's decisions regarding his employment and the ongoing investigation. The attorney stiffened. Connor stared at the table. The external audit has uncovered significant financial misrepresentations in the Safeguard Initiative documentation, I said, sliding folders across the table. Projected revenues were inflated by 340%. Development costs were underreported by approximately $12 million. Technical feasibility assessments were altered against the recommendations of 3 separate engineering teams. Connor's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. Additionally, I continued, the HR investigation has substantiated 27 complaints of workplace harassment, improper termination, and hostile work environment creation. I glanced up at Connor. Would you like to comment before I continue? For a moment, I thought he might explode, rage, deny, threaten. Instead, he deflated further. What's the point? He asked, voice hollow. You've won. Just tell me what happens now. His attorney hissed something in his ear, but he waved her off. The board has voted unanimously to terminate your employment, effective immediately, I said. Criminal charges will not be pursued, provided you cooperate fully with the ongoing financial investigation. Relief flashed across his face. He'd expected worse. However, I added, Lintech will be filing civil claims to recover misappropriated funds and damages resulting from your mismanagement. The attorney leaned forward. That's completely non-negotiable. I finished for her, as is the 5-year non-compete agreement and the clawback of Mr. Weldon's last 2 performance bonuses. I closed my folder and stood. Legal will provide the complete documentation. You have 24 hours to clear out your office. As I turned to leave, Connor finally found his voice. Why not just destroy me completely? You could. Everyone knows you have the power now. I paused at the door, considering the broken man before me. The privileged bully who had humiliated me, thrown my badge in the trash, called me useless in front of an entire department. Because that's what you would do, Connor, I said softly. And Lintech deserves better than that kind of leadership. It always did. The following days blurred together in a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and restructuring. I promoted Melissa to head a new employee wellness initiative with a substantial budget and real authority. I established a committee to review compensation structures company-wide, focusing on eliminating gender and racial pay gaps. I allocated additional funding to 3 R&D projects that had been starved for resources under the previous administration. On Friday afternoon, Charles Weldon requested a meeting. He'd submitted his resignation the day after the board meeting, but I'd asked him to stay on as an advisor during the transition. Despite his blind spot where Connor was concerned, Charles was an experienced executive who knew the company's history. And unlike his son, he had genuinely cared for Richard. You've accomplished more in a week than most CEOs do in a quarter, he said when we sat down in my office. Richard would be proud.
Thank you, I said.
That means a lot. He glanced at the photograph of Richard on my desk, Richard with his arm around me at my graduate school commencement. He never told me, Charles said quietly, about the shares, about you. We were friends for 30 years, and he never said a word. He didn't tell me either, I admitted. Not until the letter after he died. I think he wanted to protect both of us. You from feeling like you were being evaluated, me from the pressure of expectations. Charles nodded slowly. That sounds like Richard.
He paused.
For what it's worth, I'm sorry about Connor's behavior. I should have seen what was happening. It's not just about Connor, I said carefully. The culture shifted. People became afraid to innovate, to take risks, to speak truth to power. And now, I smiled slightly. Now they're learning that the fastest way to get my attention is to challenge conventional thinking, to imagine something better than what exists. Charles stood, extending his hand. Lintech is in good hands. I'll have my final transition notes to you by Monday. As he reached the door, I called after him. Charles? I meant what I said about no personal vendettas. Connor's actions have consequences, but they don't define your legacy here. He gave me a sad smile. Unfortunately, Alyssa, I think they might. But perhaps they shouldn't define Lintech's future. That part is up to you now. After he left, I walked to the windows overlooking the campus. Employees streamed between buildings in the late afternoon sun, their movements energized in a way they hadn't been when I first arrived as an intern. My phone buzzed with a text from Jared. Team staying late. Breakthrough on the protocol. You might want to see this. I smiled, pocketing my phone. Richard hadn't just left me a company. He left me a mission to rebuild what had been broken, to restore what had been lost. And I was just getting started. 6 months after the boardroom revelation, I stood on the stage at Lintech's annual developer conference, watching 5,000 faces turn toward me as the lights dimmed. The energy in the convention center crackled with anticipation, not just for our product announcements, but for what many industry insiders were calling the Langston Renaissance. Welcome to Next Frontier, I said into the microphone, using the conference name Richard had chosen years ago. Where we don't just imagine tomorrow, we build it. The crowd erupted in applause. In the front row, Jared and his team sat with barely contained excitement. Today was their moment. 6 months ago, Lintech stood at a crossroads. I continued. We could continue down a path of short-term gains and flashy promises, or we could return to our roots, groundbreaking innovation built on technical excellence and integrity. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Somewhere in the middle section, I spotted Melissa with her new wellness team. Near the back, Eleanor gave me a subtle thumbs up. Today, I'm proud to announce that Lintech is not only back on track, we're redefining the track entirely. The screens behind me illuminated with the new Lintech logo, Richard's original design, slightly modernized. The crowd murmured appreciatively at the nod to our heritage. Our flagship announcement today isn't just a product. It's a revolution in digital security architecture. I gestured to Jared, who bounded up to join me on stage. Together, we unveiled Project Sentinel, his security protocol, now expanded into a comprehensive platform that early tests showed was light years ahead of competitors. As Jared launched into the technical presentation, I stepped back, feeling a surge of pride. This was what Richard had envisioned. Innovation without compromise, excellence without ego. The stock price had already responded, climbing steadily as investor confidence returned. But more importantly, the soul of the company had been restored. After the keynote, I made my way through the crowded exhibition hall, stopping to chat with developers and partners. No security detail, no entourage, just conversations with the people who made Lintech what it was. Ms. Carter, a reporter intercepted me near one of the demo stations. Catherine Chun, Tech Insider. Do you have a comment on the rumors about Connor Weldon's new venture? I'd been expecting this question. News had leaked last week that Connor had secured modest funding for a startup, positioning himself as a disruptor, taking on established players like Lintech. I wish Mr. Weldon success in his endeavors, I said simply. Innovation thrives on competition. What I didn't say was that most major investors had declined to back Connor after the Lintech scandal. His flashy announcement had garnered headlines, but little serious interest. Without his father's connections and the Lintech name, Connor was discovering just how challenging the tech world could be for those without substance behind their swagger. And the lawsuit, the reporter pressed, was settled last month to all parties' satisfaction. I replied, Lintech is focused on the future, not the past. Another half-truth. The settlement had been brutal for Connor, stripping away most of his remaining assets and reputation. But it had also been fair, proportionate to his actions, not driven by revenge. Back in my office that evening, I found a small package on my desk, a gift from the original engineering team, the ones who'd been with Richard from the beginning. Inside was a framed photograph I'd never seen before, Richard in the company's first office, really just a converted garage, surrounded by a handful of young, grinning developers. On the back, someone had written, "The start of something extraordinary. Thank you for bringing us home." I placed it beside the photo of Richard and me, creating a before and after timeline of the Lintech legacy. My phone buzzed with a text from Jared, "Conference after party at Orion. Team insists you make an appearance. No excuses this time." I smiled, remembering how different things had been just months ago, the closet office, the impossible assignments, the isolation. Now I moved through the company not as an outsider, but as its heart, connected to every department, every project, every success and setback. As I gathered my things to leave, a notification popped up on my computer, a news alert mentioning Connor. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked. The article was brief. Connor's fledgling company had lost its primary investor following concerns about leadership and financial projections. An accompanying photo showed him leaving a downtown building, expression grim, reporters trailing behind. I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Connor had been raised to believe in his own superiority, never taught the value of earning respect rather than demanding it. In some ways, he'd been set up to fail. But sympathy didn't equal regret. His choices had been his own, and the consequences were earned. I closed the browser and headed for the door. The past was settled. The future beckoned. At the restaurant, I found not just Jared's team, but representatives from every department, a spontaneous company-wide celebration. Someone had reserved the entire rooftop deck, where San Francisco's lights sparkled below us like a mirror of the night sky. Speech, Someone called as I entered, and the crowd took up the chant. Reluctantly, I stepped onto a small platform near the bar. But looking out at these faces, some I'd known as an intern, others I'd hired myself, I realized I did have something to say. 6 months ago, someone called me useless. I began, and a knowing murmur ran through the crowd. It was meant as the ultimate dismissal, that I had no value, no power, no place at the table. I raised my glass. But here's what I've learned. True power isn't about titles or corner offices or whose name is on the building. It's about vision, integrity, the courage to stand up for what's right, even when you're standing alone. The room had fallen completely silent. Faces turned toward me in the warm rooftop lighting. Richard Langston built this company believing that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. That profit means nothing without purpose. That how we win matters as much as winning itself. I looked around at the circle of faces, brilliant minds united by a shared mission. So yes, I was once considered useless by someone who measured value only in dollars and dominance. But I'd rather be useless in that world than successful in it. I raised my glass higher. To Lintech, to Richard's legacy, and to all of you who make it worth fighting for. As cheers erupted around me, I felt Richard's presence more strongly than ever, not as a ghost or memory, but as a vision made real through collective effort and shared purpose. The useless intern had become the unshakable leader, and we were just getting started.